Fast cure or fair trial? What matters more? Imagine a pharmaceutical company on the verge of breakthrough on Alzheimer's drug. Investors are thrilled, patients are hopeful, doctors are excited, but behind the scene, data is being manipulated. A scandal erupts, shaking the whole scientific community. Yes, this was 2024 Cassava Sciences scandal. In 2024, Cassava Sciences faced legal action from US SEC. The charge was manipulation of data during clinical trials. And we had a similar case study on manipulation of data and clinical trials in 2024 mains. And today we will be discussing that case study. We'll not only break down the case study, but also discuss the case study using business ethical principles and structured reasoning. Stay tuned because towards the end, I'm going to give you a small structure, or probably I'll give you some tips about how to answer case studies. Here's the case. Dr. Srinivasan, a senior scientist at a leading biotechnology company, is leading research on a new drug for a rapidly spreading infectious disease. There's intense pressure to expedite clinical trials for market advantage. His team suggests taking unethical shortcuts, manipulating data to exclude negative results, skipping informed consent, using a rival company's patented compounds. Dr. Srinivasan knows these shortcuts are wrong, but he also realizes that without them, the company might fail to meet market expectations. He faces an ethical dilemma. What should he do? There are 3 questions in the case study. Let's start discussing it one by one. The very first question is, what would you do in that situation? And the question expects you, or I should say, the question is trying to test your decision-making abilities. We're asking you, what would you do? That means, how will you decide? Dr. Srinivasan's challenge was, as a scientist and a leader, he had to focus on scientific integrity. He had to focus on informed consent of patients. He has to be aware of the regulatory standards. But the proposed shortcuts in terms of manipulation of data, infringement of patents, not only violated the scientific integrity standards, but also contravened or violated the basic principles of business ethics. If I was in Dr. Srinivasan's place, first thing I would do is I would reject the data manipulation. Why? Because fabricating data or omitting negative outcomes can endanger public safety. Now, this is best exemplified in Vioxx scandal of Merck. The next thing I would do is I would insist on informed consent, because every patient has a right to know the risks and benefit of participation. If you don't inform the patient of the consequences, it's nothing but exploitation. As we could see in Tuskegee study, and this is something I had spoken about in class also. The third thing I would do is I refuse to compromise with intellectual property. Intellectual property violations are not only unethical but also illegal, and this best exemplified in HeLa cell controversy. If the pressure to take shortcut continues, as a scientist I have no other option. I'll probably scale it up. I'll escalate the issue to regulatory bodies. Say, I may go to corporate ethics committees, or probably, who knows, I may go public also. Because as a scientist, I am expected to maintain data integrity, I am expected to maintain patient safety, I am expected to respect intellectual property. The second question happens to be, examine your options and consequences in the light of ethical questions involved. The question sounds simple, but it's not as simple as that. There are 3 layers to it. Layer number 1, you have to talk about the ethical questions that confront Dr. Srinivasan. Second, the options. And third, the consequences. Dr. Srinivasan's challenge revolves around the dilemma between commercial interests and ethical integrity. And following are the main ethical concerns that confronted Dr. Srinivasan. The first one. The first concern, and which is a very valid concern, is the choice between deception and being truthful. Being deceptive in terms of manipulating data is an easy way out for the company to make profit. But if discovered, there will be a huge legal cost and a big damage to reputation, as we could see in Theranos scandal of 2018. The second ethical dilemma is, violating patient safety in the name of expediency just for faster cure. You cannot play with patient safety, and this is something which we could see in thalidomide controversy earlier. Now that we have looked at the challenges, let's come down to options and consequences. The first clear-cut option happens to be conducting trials ethically. Why? Because you cannot compromise with patient safety, you cannot compromise with scientific integrity. Yes, but the only flip side is, the only consequence here is, this is slow and time-taking. But it'll keep the image of the company intact. At the same time, it will maintain scientific integrity. The second option is shortcuts due to expediency. Because these are difficult times, I need to hurry things, so I take a shortcut. But the risk here is, if discovered, there'll be a legal cost. If discovered, there'll be a lot of public mistrust. If discovered, the company's reputation takes a damage. And besides, as a scientist, I lose my integrity completely. And the last option is escalating it, or I should say blowing whistle, go out in the public. But doing that, yes, by doing it, I do maintain my ethical integrity. I ensure that I'm being a great scientist. But at the same time, there is a cost involved there also. There's a risk of whistleblowing. Now the last question is how drug and data ethics can save humanity in such a situation. In a scenario present in the case study like this, where manipulation of data, cutting corners is advised, it's only in these kind of situations, it's drug and data ethics that acts as a safeguard against scientific misconduct and corporate greed. Ethical guidelines such as Declaration of Helsinki mandates accountability, transparency, and accuracy in drug research. Following these principles ensures that the drugs are not only ethically manufactured, but also the drugs are product of ethical practices. Now that's how companies can build trust in their product and manufacturing practices. Ethical compliance in drug research leads to prevention of widespread public health catastrophes, like the one we saw in US involving opioids. Adhering to informed consent, ensure that participants willingly participate, knowing fully well the risks and the consequences involved in the clinical trials. Otherwise, they'll end up being exploited, just like what happened in the Tuskegee study. Lastly, when it comes to drug and data ethics, we can call on AI. We can use AI to detect irregularities in clinical trial data collection. We can use AI to detect anomalies or irregularities in clinical trial data. By using AI, we can prevent these frauds, the data frauds or the manipulation of data frauds that we see. Drug and data ethics are not barriers, but an essential framework for balancing innovation and human safety. As I promised earlier, I'll have some answer writing tips for you. Tip number 1. Question number 1 was a personal question where the word you was there. In such questions, always write in first person. That was tip number 1. Tip number 2. In question number 3, there were 3 layers. Understand the layers so that you get your answers right. Tip number 2. And tip number 3. If you saw my discussion, I was using real life cases to supplement my arguments. Always do that. That's going to get some extra marks. So these are the 3 tips I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed today's case. So long. Happy learning.